audiologist gave us information about Jaden's hearing loss, and the second audiologist gave us information about cochlear implant. No, we never heard anything about American Sign Language or language at all. The first audiologist didn't give us any information about sign language. She did give us some information about cued speech, but nothing ever about sign language. The second audiologist who gave us information about a cochlear implant said to not sign with our son, because if he was to sign, he wouldn't learn to hear with his implant and he would become lazy and just depend on the signs. The candidacy process that the implant center had was based on a few different things. One of them being the child's desire to communicate. And our son at 2.5 had a strong desire to communicate, obviously. Other criteria was parent involvement. How involved were the parents in making sure that they were going to follow up with speech therapy, make sure they got to school, make sure that they had their cochlear implant on at all times. Third criteria was an evaluation by a psychologist to make sure that the family was mentally fit, I suppose, is what it was for.
And make sure, I guess, that we were going to be mentally into the process.
And then also making sure that we were going to follow their advice, because if we didn't go to the specific school that they told us to, or if we didn't go to specific speech therapist that they told us to, they would refuse to implant him. So based upon all that criteria, our son was labeled a candidate.
My experience with the bill, there's a lot of holes in it. A lot of key phrases that are in the bill that it shouldn't be in the bill. Certain words. There's a lot of words that really put parents out of focus on certain people, certain professionals. One being an audiologist. A parent, after finding out that their infant has failed the test, are automatically referred to an audiologist, whereas the audiologist shouldn't be the one making the decisions on where they're there to test the outer ear, and then after that they should be referred somewhere else. In the bill, it states that they're referred to an audiologist or other related professional. In that case, I sat down during a meeting with Mendoza, and I'd asked him who the other related professionals were, and he sat there kind of puzzled and couldn't even answer himself. Took about 15-20 seconds to even finally say, I don't really know, let me ask my assistant. His assistant then turned and said, well, one of the other families, he looked through his paperwork, fumbled through it, and says, the other related professional is an audiologist. And I looked at Mendoza and I asked him, that doesn't answer my question. Who are the other related professionals? And he looked at me in puzzlement and says, that's a good question. I said, that's a good question. Why are you bringing this bill forward if you're not fully informed about everything? It just doesn't make sense. If you're not fully informed, what's this bill going to do? And he just looked kind of bewildered.
I think the audiologist specifically the audiologist at the Cochlear Implant Center, the options that we were given were really, if we wanted our child to be successful, then he would get a cochlear implant, he would go to this specific oral private school, and he would go to the specific speech therapist. And if he didn't, he would not be successful. So those were the options that were presented to us. I think that the audiologist, was always looking at what our son couldn't do. It was always putting him in a hearing booth test and telling us what he couldn't hear. Putting him in front of a speech therapist and telling us what he couldn't say, what he couldn't do. It was always negative. It was always, he can't sit still, he doesn't have attention span, he can't make this sound, he can't hear this. So it was always very negative. There was never anything positive ever came out of a visit with an audiologist. Actually, the advice that the audiologist gave us after the second implant had failed was that we needed to take him in for an MRI to make sure that his auditory nerve was working correctly, and that we needed to just go ahead and implant him with a new implant and implant the other ear, and get him going with 2 implants and see how that works. I feel that I really don't understand why information should be given to parents of deaf children from an audiologist in the first place. I don't feel that they are neutral in this situation whatsoever. I feel that their job is to fix the ear, and there's no way that they can be neutral in the information that they're giving. I don't think that when a deaf baby is born that there is any kind of health problem to begin with. The only thing that they need at that point is language, and an audiologist clearly is not the person that's going to give them information on language. Their job is to test the ear and fix the ear. And so for the information to be coming from an audiologist, it never will be neutral, and it can't be neutral. And so it definitely should be coming from elsewhere. And like my husband stated, when he asked when he asked Mendoza, who is the person who's proposing this bill, if not the audiologist, then who? Your bill states that it'll be a different professional, another professional. Who is that person? And the person who's proposing this bill doesn't even know that. So I think it's just a gateway for audiologists, speech therapists, and people who are trying to push oralism onto these children to get in there and make way.
Definitely. If we're, language, it's not an option, especially early on. It's the most important thing.
It's the only thing they need.
If it's a foundation, if you would have had early exposure, if they were just didn't, if they didn't know what it was, start them on early, or American Sign Language, some kind of language. Foundation is, the most important thing in anything. If you don't have a solid foundation, the rest of it just comes apart.
I feel that our son's life would have been different if us as the parents were given information on ASL from the very beginning. To be able to provide him with language from the start, regardless of the choices that we made with an implant or not, at least he would have had language, and he would have had, like my husband's saying, that foundation. And regardless of the ill-advised choices that we made, he still would have had language, and that was all he needed, and that's all he needs now. So definitely his world would be completely different now if we were to be given information on ASL. I don't think the audiologists have any idea about giving information about language development to parents of newly identified children. From our experience, we never got information from them about language development. Language was never even mentioned. There was a lot of talk about speech. Speech isn't a language. It should have been language from the very beginning that was discussed with us, and an audiologist is not that person, and they never will be that person.
They're in it to try and get the quick, to be honest with you, it sounds like to get the quick fix. We want to fix the ear. We want to make them hear. And what happens when it doesn't work? What do you have to fall back on? We didn't have anything. There was no foundation.
I wish that from the very beginning, in the hospital room, somebody would have said, who you need to meet right now is a deaf person, a deaf family, a deaf adult. They themselves have grown up and experienced what deaf is. My husband and I, we will never know what being deaf is, but that's something that they could have given to our family and to our son. And what I know of the deaf community now is they would have been more than happy to be there for us. And so if we could go back now, that's definitely who I would have wanted to meet from the very beginning. It would have made a world of difference.